This is Jerry Cooker, or Mr. Cooker. He's my choir director from school. I will be interviewing him for the interview from the 60s and 70s. My first question, how old were you, where were you from, and what were you doing?
Well, I was just finishing my teenage years, and I graduated from high school in 1962 and then went to college. And I was living in Chicago, went to high school in Chicago, and went to college at Concordia University in River Forest. And I started teaching in the fall of 1965, and I was teaching in New York. And then from New York, I went to Wisconsin. So in the 60s and in the 70s, I was teaching. Now, I was not one of the typical 1960s hippies with long hair and all that stuff. No, I wasn't. But I did live in Chicago and New York and Wisconsin during that time.
What did you do for fun?
Well, if you want to know what I did as a child, we didn't get our first TV until I was 12 years old. So we learned to do a lot of things, playing with the neighbor kids and doing things like that, playing ball at the park, because we had a very small yard in Chicago, so we'd go to the park all the time to play. And just did a lot of things with our friends. And I, of course, like music, so did a lot of listening to music. And in high school and in college, I sang in choirs. I was not on any sports teams. And of course, I spent a lot of time practicing piano and then practicing the organ.
Where were you and what were you doing when JFK was shot? How did you find out?
I was in college, and I remember it very vividly. I was coming out of the library to go back to the dormitory, and somebody came running out of the dormitory yelling that the president had been shot. And there was only one TV for the entire dormitory, and we all ran to the basement to sit in front of the TV and see all of this. And I know it was like overwhelming. It was a shock. We could not believe that it had happened.
Did you like President Nixon? Why or why not?
I liked President Nixon. I liked him because he was a Christian man, and he was very vocal in what he believed in and stood for. I just liked him as a president. Now, remember, I was a little bit younger, so was not into politics as much, and knowing exactly and understanding everything that was going on at the time, try as I may. And again, during that time, we didn't have all of the news media and stuff that was so close at hand to realize what was going on, and sometimes you didn't find out about things until later.
What did you think of the Vietnam War? Did you support it or did you hate it?
I was one of those people who probably was kind of in the middle. I did not like the idea that because a lot of my friends had to go fight in that war. I never got drafted to go, so I didn't have to go. I was worried about having to go because I knew it was a very nasty war, and the possibility of being killed in that war was very probable, and it was very hard to understand why we were at that time supporting what was going on. But you also have to realize that I grew up in an era where we were very much afraid of the communists, and therefore we knew that, to protect our country and our world from the communists, we had to be able to go and support other countries that the communists were trying to take over. And so for that reason, I had to be supportive of the war, because in the end it could really be all about protecting our country eventually. Young people today do not understand the fear that we had of communism. I mean, a lot of people built bomb shelters in the basements of their houses. And if we ever heard the air raid siren go on, I mean, off, we were really scared to death that we were going to be bombed by the communists. We were afraid of the communists taking over our country. And so therefore, you know, we felt that it was important that we go to war to support democracy and freedom, and that was one of the things that the Vietnam War was doing.
Do you remember any civil rights stuff, like segregation?
Oh yeah, that was a big thing too. Right at the time when I was graduating from college is when there were a lot of riots going on in big cities. They were burning parts of the city and everything else because the blacks felt that they were being treated unjustly. It's almost like it is right now today. And so there would be riots and marches and everything else going on.
Mm-hmm. Did you watch the I Have a Dream speech on television?
Yes, I remember that. I can't remember if I watched it actually when it was being played on television live or if I watched a rebroadcast, because I don't remember exactly what time of the day and when it was, and it might have been that I was in class or something, and I don't, but I saw the whole thing. I watched it at one time or other on the TV.
How did you feel about the Cuban Missile Crisis?
That was another one of those things that I have to say that, you know, again, because we were very afraid of the communists and protecting our country, you know, we were very concerned about the fact that we did not want the communists to have the ability to have missiles anywhere that would be too close to our country that, you know, could bomb our country.
Mm-hmm. What did you watch on television?
Well, during those days, I can't, you know, some of the shows that were on, you've never heard of, but, you know, they were all the Father Knows Best, and, I can't even remember the names of some of them anymore, but they were all kind of family-oriented shows, and they were fun, they were hysterical, there was a lot of laughter, a lot of slapstick in them. You didn't see the violence in the shows that you see now. You didn't see the shooting. Oh, and we watched, as a kid, we watched a lot of cowboy movies, like Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and all of those kind of movies. And then, but I can't remember some of the other shows right offhand that were popular during the time that I was in high school.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Were you excited about the first man on the moon?
Oh yes, very excited. Everybody was glued to their TVs when that was going to happen. We wanted to watch that and see that and really be a part of that. Remember that vividly.
Did you like the Beatles? Why or why not?
Oh yeah, I like the Beatles. Everybody loved the Beatles in that generation and that age. That was the best music on the radio. And that's the music that we danced to at any of the dances that we had at school or in college or whatever. We danced to the Beatles.
What? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Can you compare kids' attitudes today back in the 60s and 70s?
I think that probably one of the things that's different is the fact that as kids, we really had to work very hard for everything that we had because our parents had lived through the Depression. So our parents had very little. And as children growing up, we had very little. And so if we had to do something, I mean, if we wanted something, we had to work hard for it. And I think all the time while I was in high school and college, I always had 2 or 3 part-time jobs to earn extra money. The only way that I was able to afford to go to college is I had to earn all the money to pay for my college education. Otherwise, I would not have been able to go. So that meant doing a lot of work and a lot of jobs, and there wasn't always a lot of free time. And I think one of the things that today a lot of the younger children expect everything to be given to them. If they want something, they expect to get it. They expect that their parents will get it for them. They don't want to work too hard to get what they want. And of course, during the time when I was growing up, there weren't all the the clothes fashions and everything that everybody was watching and following, and that you had to have a certain brand of this or that. You just wanted to look nice, and we didn't expect to go on vacations and trips like kids go on now, because people didn't have the money to do those things. Our parents were just really trying to survive and get ahead after the Depression.
Mhm. This is the final question. What was the best event in the 1960s or through 70s? What was the worst?
You want to know a historical event that was the
Like-
best event, or?
Historical, personal?
Well, the most important personal event in that era was that I met my wife and got married. And so that was the very most important event, and both of our children, both of our daughters were born during that time, and so I would say those were the most important personal events. And I can't think of any particular historical event now. After you leave the room, I'll think of something that was an important event that happened during that era, but can't think of anything right now. I remember a lot of the historical events, but can't think of one right now. Sorry. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.